This is the I Read Comic Books podcast. I am your host, Mike Rapin. Joining me this week, 2 leaves falling in my backyard, adding to the messy canvas of birdseed and overgrown grass, Brian Murray.
I'm a leaf on the wind.
And Paul Jasley.
I am the law.
Today on I Read Comic Books, we're going to be talking about some comics and things that we went over, but I do have a quick announcement right now on the IRCB Patreon. If you're not a member, we are doing a vote for November's IRCB Movie Club, which is our quarterly patron series where me and Brian and Paul, the people on this episode, we talk about comic book based movies or adjacent movies. You can join and you can vote on the 3 movies that we have up right now. Swamp Thing from 1982, Blade from 1998, and Creepshow from 1982. Blade's in the lead, but the month is still young, so you can go on and you can turn the tide. I'm going to say Paul really wants to watch Creepshow, but it's really up to the people.
Creepshow.
Go to join IRCB patreon.com/IRCB podcast, and you can join and vote. But let's get into things. Let's talk about comic books, because that's what we're here to do on I Read Comic Books every week. So I have 2 legally mandated questions that I have to ask you, which is, how have you been? How have comic books been? Let's start with you, Brian.
I've been pretty good. I haven't been reading comics so much as I've been playing video games lately.
Yeah.
Picked up I Was a Teenage Exocolonist on Steam. That's a lot of fun.
What?
It's a very cute little like story game where you play as someone who's on a spaceship that crash lands, and it follows the next 10 years of your life as you try to survive in this new colony world.
Interesting.
But it's got a cool like almost not quite roguelike, but that same idea where like when the game ends, it's not actually over,
right?
Sort of thing. Like
okay.
You go back and restart, and you have like memories from your past life that can change the outcomes.
Cool.
So it's a lot of fun. But I did do some comic book reading, so I'm not a total loser.
Thank you.
Just a partial one. I picked up Alien Volume 2. This is the new series with Philip Kennedy Johnson and Salvador Larroca. This one's kind of cool. It's sort of a period piece. It is still set in the future, but it's set on like a colony world of these religious fanatics who are like not quite space Amish, but certainly like in that Luddite direction.
Okay.
It's basically the Old West.
So the diehard Firefly fan base or something, right?
yeah. It's got Firefly vibes for sure.
Sure.
But then, as you might expect, aliens happen, and you'll never guess who's responsible unless you've read or watched any Aliens stuff, in which case you'll know it was Weyland-Yutani.
Of course.
Yeah, they seeded a spaceship and sent it crashing into the colony to wipe out the colonists because they wanted to test their alien bioweapon.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like they're always testing the damn thing. But I love the xenomorphs because of their versatility. You know, like you see like the dog xenomorph in Alien 3 and stuff like that. Like the way they turn into different kinds of monsters based on whatever they incubate inside of. And this one has these like bug mole things that get implanted. And so we have these things that are essentially like just lampreys, like with that circular mouth full of horrible teeth.
Yeah. I hate that.
It's like, imagine that, but covered in a shiny black carapace with a bunch of little bug legs.
Terrible.
All right.
Yeah. Super cool. But an absolute nightmare. At one point, one of them fully burrows into somebody's mouth. Like,
that gives me the chills, man. I hate that stuff. I hate it in movies. I hate the fact that you talked about it on the show.
They really go hard on gore in this book. Like, you definitely see when, the aliens love to punch through the back of somebody's head.
Oh, yeah.
And in the movies, it's just like a quick cutaway. In this, you get the full, like, face exploding outward, like somebody getting showered with teeth from their former lover.
Jeez. Well, this is definitely an explicit episode of IRCB.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah. But there's a great moment where one of the military guys who works for the company is being told, like, Don't worry. I mean, there's some aliens outside. We're safe in here. And his response is basically, no, the fuck we're not. We gotta go. And of course, he is proven correct.
These tropes of alien stuff, like I feel like this is an entire genre of like sci-fi horror in itself, with just the types of tropes of like, don't worry, we're gonna be fine. And then they absolutely are. Like, it never gets old. It just never gets old for me.
It's always very frustrating to watch somebody and be like, I have to remind myself, they don't know that they're in an alien comic book.
Right?
Like,
Yeah.
It's like when you see somebody in a horror movie and you're like, why would you go down to the basement? It's like, they don't know they're in a horror movie.
Right.
They don't. I go to my basement all the time.
Yeah.
If I hear a weird noise, I assume it's the cat.
Right. Oh man. So you're enjoying the Alien comic series then?
Yeah, I mean, it's fine. I don't know. I'm probably not going to remember any of this in 2 weeks.
Sure.
It did not like have a big impact on me, but I don't know. It was fun.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Well, yeah, Nick's been trying to push me on this book for a long time. I think I need to continue. I read the first arc. I liked it. I think I just probably need read that second arc. Paul, what about you? What have you been reading? How have you been?
I've been doing well, Mike. For those who are curious, we are in the midst of some autumnal weather here in West Michigan. West Michigan Weather Report. It is actually a nice 60-degree sunny day right now, but it was not that way 2 hours ago. We are in the midst of, Michigan autumn. So the mornings are very cold, but this looks like a nice day. So I might have to go outside and enjoy these last rays of sunshine before, winter comes, as they say. But that's always a good excuse to stay in and read some good comics. I've read a bunch of stuff this week, and I wanted to take some time to really talk about something I absolutely loved, and I want to recommend to all the listeners and my co-hosts here, and that is the Best of 2000 AD Volume 1. As the title suggests, this is a collection of material from the long-running British anthology comic 2000 AD, which I'm sure most people know as the comic book that has Judge Dredd in it, but it's so much more than that. We
That's
have
me.
45 years worth of material from 2000 AD. It's mainly science fiction based stuff. And the thing with 2000 AD is because it's an anthology comic, it's never really been a big hit in the United States because the US comic markets isn't welcoming to anthology titles for some reason. So, but this book was originally announced to come out in the spring of 2020. And obviously that, for obvious reasons, didn't happen. It got reformatted from a maxi series of 12 issues down to, I think, 6 trade collections, which I think is a smart move because you get a ton of comics in this first volume. You get material from the past 2000 AD, from the 80s and 90s. You get more contemporary stories. And you get a brand new Judge Dredd story written by John Wagner, who, of course, co-created the character. That's got art by Kev Walker. And it's great. I've talked about Dredd a bunch on the show, and there's particular Dredd stories I really like, particularly John Wagner Dredd stories where Wagner uses Dredd as a way to talk about contemporary politics and culture in a way. And it's less about Dredd as a character, more about Mega City 1 as a concept. So this story is called Muty Block, and it's about how these mutants from the Cursed Earth are immigrating to Mega City 1. Throughout the story, you have the bureaucrats involved in that process basically flat out saying, we don't want these mutants here, so we make this process as difficult as possible to discourage them from coming. We tell them there's no jobs available. We put them in these crappy mega blocks, and all this stuff.
That's so unrealistic.
Right? Could you imagine if that was...
Holy shit.
What kind of horrible, inhumane government would do that?
What I love is that, there is that sort of black humor satire to it, but it's just a really good story on top of that, where there's these groups that are working to sort of sabotage this plot or sabotage this process, and they're going to blow up the block where all the mutants are housed. And of course, one of the judges, not Dredd, but another judge basically says yeah, I don't want these mutants here either, but the law says we have to protect them. So we will, I guess. And it's it's not even thinly veiled political commentary. It's so well done. I really enjoyed it. So yeah.
Yeah. Subtle as a brick to the face.
Yeah. And that's how I like my Dredd stories,
Yeah. It's very appropriate for Dredd.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really great. If you want some Dredd stuff, that's a great sort of new Dredd story. I want to highlight a couple of the older reprints in this book that I really think are worth checking out if you are curious. before I get to that, there is a story called Brink that's written by Dan Abnett with art by Ian J. Culberd. That's a more recent 2000 AD story. I think that just recently concluded in 2000 AD, but you get like the first 3 or 4 chapters of that in this book. And it's like a murder mystery detective story set in the future where the Earth has been destroyed and everyone's living on the brink of humanity, a brink of extinction. Get it? In these giant floating space stations. That was a really fun book.
This isn't like a perfect allusion to one of my favorite made-for-TV Disney movies, Brink?
Is that
what you're
really hoping?
Too.
Yeah, trust me, I love Brink, and I was hoping for an adaptation of that, but it's not.
Just one guy in roller skates. That's all that I wanted to see, right? Anyway.
If only we could find a giant loophole to make that part of the movie club to watch Brink at some point. So, but I think the real attraction here for people that are curious about 2000 AD Beyond Dread, you get the first 10 chapters, and that's 50 pages worth of comics right there, of The Ballad of Halo Jones, which is a series from 1984, written by Alan Moore with art by Ian Gibson. This is one of the most famous 2000 AD stories. It's one of Alan Moore's first major comic works before Watchmen. It's set in the 50th century, and it follows the life of an 18-year-old woman named Halo Jones, and she's really fed up with the world she lives in. Her and her friends live in this, basically it's a giant metropolis that's floating in the Atlantic Ocean that's for people that are unemployed. So there's nothing to do. There's a lot of violence. They're kind of quarantined from the rest of society. She wants to escape, and she dreams of going to the stars. And the first 10 chapters here, you get her a lot of world building of that. You get a sense of who Halo Jones is, how she wants to break free of the life that she has. And she sees her other friends get caught up in some tragic ways in the world that they live in. So it's really cool to see a science fiction story that's not inherently like violent. It's like a slice of life science fiction story. And it's the first 2000 AD story to have a female lead character. And it's written by 2 male creators, but the idea that you'd have comic strip in a quote unquote boys comic like 2000 AD that had a female lead character and wasn't just like a violent science fiction story. It's really groundbreaking stuff, even to this day, even though it's almost 40 years old. I really, really enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot more to it. There's like 3 volumes of that story. This is just the first volume. And of course, there's a big ad at the end of this, like, be sure to look out for the hardcover collection of all of The Ballad of Halo Jones coming in January. I'm like, yep, I'm going to pre-order that because I liked it so much.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But isn't the like unfortunate side of The Ballad of Halo Jones that it was never finished? Because more like I think when we watched the 2000 AD like documentary, right? Like, yeah, there was some hubbub about like more moving to the United States or moving his work to the United States and like some issues that he had with 2000 AD, right?
As far as I know, yeah, there was some legal issues regarding the ownership of the characters, since Fleetway, which was the publisher of 2000 AD at the time, claimed to own the characters that Moore created.
Yeah.
A similar thing happened to DC when he wrote Watchmen. It's just a common theme in his career. But originally, The Ballad of Halo Jones was supposed to be 9 volumes to cover her entire life story. It was canceled after the first 3 volumes. And it's kind of like this big tragedy because Moore had the whole story plotted out and never got to finish it. So, yeah. And apparently doesn't want to go back. Like it's too painful to go back to finish that stuff. So, So again, that's like the first 10 chapters of that. And then you do get a complete story in here. You get a complete Judge Anderson story from 1990 that was written by Alan Grant, the late, great Alan Grant, with art by Arthur Ranson. Of course, Judge Anderson is a character in the Judge Dredd mythos. She's the sort of the judge that has psychic abilities, part of the Psy-Ops division of the judge system there. And this story is about her and her supervisor teaming up with 2 side judges from the Soviet city East Meg 2 to explore some strange phenomena that are going on across the planet. And if you know anything about Judge Dredd, you know that Judge Dredd destroyed East Meg 1 at the end of the Apocalypse War. So there's some tension between Mega City 1 and East Meg 2. I do like that Alan Grant references the end of the Cold War. He makes like offhand remark like, oh, there's this new spirit of Glasnost here in East Meg 2. So like hinting at, even in the future of Judge Dredd, there is an end to the Cold War in sight, you know, since it's written in 1990. They find out that there's like an ancient civilization living in the Earth's core, and they go to explore the ruins of that civilization. It's a pretty fun mix of like supernatural and sci-fi stuff. And then Ranson's artwork is really incredible. I'm not familiar with Arthur Ranson's work. It's like hyper detailed in a way that almost looks like photocopied photographs. If you did like a photo comic kind of thing, It looks amazing for the time period. And I do like that you get a full, complete story there. It's not just a few chapters. You get the complete story, but it ends in a very interesting sort of like ambiguous way that I kind of enjoyed. All being said,
I'm looking at this. Hold on. I'm looking at some previews for this art.
Yeah.
Are you telling me that this came out as a weekly book through 2000 AD?
Mm-hmm.
This is unbelievable art. Like, holy shit. Okay, sorry. I'm going to check this out. You sold me.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I will say this. If you're reading this 2000 AD stuff for the first time, it was all written, weekly as sort of like 5 to 8 page chunks, which I think makes some really interesting sort of rhythmic, makes an interesting rhythm to the storytelling, the narrative layout, but it can be repetitive because you basically get 1 page of recapping what happened in the last, chapter, 3 pages of build up, and then a cliffhanger. Kind of like that's the rhythm. And once you kind of get a sense of it, it's enjoyable, but it can be kind of repetitive right off the bat. But I think for $23, you get a solid chunk of high quality comics with this. Again, any new Dread stories from John Wagner is worth the price of admission. The Halo Jones stuff is great. It looks amazing. The Judge Anderson story is, I think, one of the best sort of Judge Dredd adjacent stories I've read. So I cannot recommend this highly enough. Even if you have no interest in Dredd or 2000 AD, if you just want some good science fiction comics, it's well worth the price of admission to pick this up. I really, really enjoyed it, and I'm excited to see the rest of these collections as they come out.
That's cool. And this is what you just talked about is just a subset of the full set of stories in this book, right?
Yeah. There's even more. There's you get a Strontium Dog story. You get another short little Judge Dredd story from Alan Grant. It's great stuff. And again, I think there's going to be 6 of these all together, these best of 2000 ADs. And then I can only imagine what they got planned for the rest of them, since there's so much good stuff in this first volume.
Cool. Very cool. Well, for me this week, I feel like I have been off my game in that I've been reading a lot of comics and not liking a lot of comics. And I feel like I've said that a lot recently, and I don't know what it is. I feel like I'm maybe reading too many X-Men books. And I know that is also a common theme. All I'm saying is that trying some new stuff, I actually found some good comics that I wanted to talk about for today. So the first book I want to talk about is Human Target number 7. Tom King, Greg Smallwood, Clayton Coles, everyone's back. Human Target's back after a little bit of a break. I just want to say this. Human Target's great. If you don't know what the premise is, it's essentially a guy gets hired to be the fall person for Lex Luthor. He gets poisoned and he finds out he has 12 days to live. And there's a lot of the story that goes from there. It's a big murder mystery. Mostly who killed me, as there's no way to cure this guy's poison, which is really, really fun. But it doesn't matter what this issue is about or how much of the story has been solved or the obvious but smart twist at the end of this issue. It doesn't matter that Greg Smallwood draws some of the most beautiful faces you could ask for in comics. It does not matter that every time I see a squiggle or a splash of color, I feel like I've been transported to a magical, nostalgia-fueled era of cigarettes, suits, romance, and espionage without all the inherent bigotry that was built into the time. I said magical, okay? None of that matters. You hear me? What does matter is this. Clayton Coles is going hard as fuck in this book. The opening pages of this issue are some of the most impressive bits of immersive, vibey letters I've seen in a long time. Clayton Coles just does the lettering for this book. And in the first couple of pages, I was like, my jaw was dropping. I couldn't believe just how perfectly the letters melded to the art to deliver an experience as to what was supposed to be happening. We've got our main 2 characters sitting in a nightclub underground, and you feel like lost in the lettering. Every letter feels like it's part of the environment. The feel of the issue would be lost without the fine details of the embedded letters to the environment on the page. The near jarbled text of lyrics that spark in your mind, and you hear a sultry feminine voice over slow jazz music. This is all conveyed through simple lettering and small iconography. It's unbelievable. This book looks great. It reads well, the story's fun, whatever. None of that matters because this issue, the winning piece of it is the lettering. And this continues throughout the whole issue. But the first couple of pages of issue number 7 of Human Target are just unbelievable. Like I read a couple of X-Men books that just put a bad taste in my mouth, and I was like, I got to read something that I'm pretty sure I'm going to like.
You're not supposed to put them in your mouth, Mike. That's the first problem.
That's true. My iPad now has bite marks in it. That's the problem. But oh my God, Clayton Cowles deserves an award for this issue alone. Like I really, really was impressed by just how amazing his lettering was in this issue. So if you haven't read Human Target, get to it. The first volume just came out. Issue number 7 starts the new arc. We're finally going to solve this here mystery of who done killed the human target. And yeah, it's really good. But I had to express my love for the letters in this book because they are so effing good.
That's interesting. I've not read this newest issue yet, but I mean,
okay,
every issue of this book, it just I like the story and I like what Tom King's doing, but oh my god, I'm just so caught up in Greg Smollard's artwork. Like it's just such an amazing looking book. It's one of those books that I'm buying it monthly, physically at the shop. I'm like, whatever deluxe hardcover comes out down the road, I'm going to buy it as well. So it's such an amazing book. So knowing that the letters are even as good in this issue is pretty amazing.
Yeah, and it's hard to be like the lettering is what makes this book, but that is genuinely what it is. Like I love how Coles has done this work. Like Smallwood's art is like unparalleled as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
I did do a comparison with Nick. I don't know if I mentioned this on the show last week or not, but like I sent a screenshot of the Fantastic Four book that Alex Ross put out, and then a screenshot of similar characters that Greg Smallwood drew, and it looks the same. But either way, they're talented artists, right? They're very talented artists. Smallwood has found the ability to make me genuinely feel like I've fallen in love with a cartoon character of a woman. Like I've never had that, like looking at a page and just being like, that's the most beautiful person I've ever seen in my life. And it's a cartoon drawing,
right.
Like it's incredible. He does a fantastic job of showing and expressing emotion for people, showing genuine happiness, fury, and like subtlety, like the subtlety in people's face. He has a knack for it. Like similar, you see that similar knack for expression in someone like Greg Smallwood does it, but also David Aja does it, like with his little just plips and small pieces of inking that he does. He's able to express a person's entire aura, in just like little tiny lines. So I always find that impressive when artists are not only talented in terms of portraying something in a way that feels believable or works really well in their style, but also to express emotion in that style. Anyways, love Human Target. Everyone should read Human Target. But I'm going to stop talking about how much I love cartoon characters, and let's talk about some other books. Brian, what else have you been reading?
So I picked this up on Hoopla, and full disclosure, I did not finish it before the show started. I have about 40 pages left, but I've been reading DC versus Vampires. The first volume is up now. It is, it's certainly something.
That's a pull quote. We're going to put it on the back of that trade.
I do sometimes wonder if they do all of these spin-offs just so that they can like kill the title characters in different gruesome ways.
Sure.
This is obviously vampires are fighting off or trying to take over the DC world. And the only people who can stop them appear to be the Bat Fam and Green Arrow.
Okay.
So you're in it now. We get I laughed out loud. One of the very first things that happens is this vampire is like wrapped up like a mummy, running the street trying to get to the Hall of Justice to get saved from something. And we get like this glimpse of what I think was Green Arrow lurking in the shadows. So you're like, oh man, this guy's about to get shot. And then I had it in guided view. So I was just tabbing through the panels. Next panel that I tabbed to is this vampire just getting nailed by a car.
Classic.
Just fully like over the hood. Like a huge wham sound effect on the page.
Hell yeah.
It's just not at all what I was expecting to happen, and I love that.
It's a good bait and switch, man. I mean, you can't.
I also was not expecting for Vampire Green Lantern to put one of the Wonder Twins into a blender, but here we are.
What?
Oh, no.
Hold on. What? Okay, no context. That's insane.
Yeah. Green Lantern puts Zan, the form of a useless water thing, Wonder Twin, into a blender made of light construct. So
sure.
Okay.
Which seemed a bit excessive to me, but that's just me. Oh, and then he says, a bit watery because Vampire Hal's got jokes.
Oh my God.
It's I don't know. I am having fun with it. I don't want to give the impression that I'm not enjoying it, but it's ridiculous in a way that I'm enjoying.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. it sounds like the DC equivalent of like the Punisher kills the Marvel universe in some way, where they're just like, let's find ways that we could kill all of these superheroes, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely closer to like a Marvel Zombies or something.
Okay.
Where vast swaths of the heroes and villains are all being turned into monsters, and the other heroes have to stop them.
Gotcha.
We get to see Vampire Riddler for just a hot sec before he gets stabbed in the face and killed.
Spoilers.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Paul. I know you were looking forward to reading this.
Yeah.
Well, I've not read this yet. I honestly really like the Deceased, which literally is the Marvel Zombies, but in the DC universe. Like, I really like that stuff, but this feels like a little bit more humorous take on that, because the DC stuff starts off kind of fun and gets pretty serious as it goes on. So
yeah, you can tell that they're having fun with it.
Nice.
Like the both the writers and the vampires in universe are having a great time. We got Vampire Zatanna going to hang out with John Constantine, and like, I think she was gonna kill him, but then they just chat and hang out for a bit until Dr. Fate shows up, and I think unravels her.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
It's one of those things where it's tough to tell what's happening on the page, but I bet it would be pretty gruesome to see in motion.
So what you're saying is that DC and Warner Brothers are definitely making a DC versus vampires movie coming up after Black Adam, right?
I mean, maybe it would probably have to be animated, and we know how HBO feels about animated series and things of that nature.
Right. You'll definitely make 2 seasons, and then right when the story starts to get good, we cancel it. It's also the Netflix method, I think.
Yeah.
Anyways, but Paul, I guess what else have you been reading? Brian, I appreciate, I guess before we jump over to Paul, I appreciate that you do try all of these weird what if side story things, because I can't bring myself to it, but I'm glad that you're willing to take the sacrifice every time, whether they're good or bad.
Yeah.
So Paul, go ahead.
I very briefly want to mention that I did pick up and enjoyed the second issue of Santos Sisters. That is the book that is done by the creators Greg and Fake, if that is their real name. I had raved about the first issue of Santos Sisters a couple months ago, so I was very excited that they have a second issue coming out. Very, very briefly, it basically feels like a mashup of Archie comics and 90s Image Rob Liefeld comics. So if you like either of those things, you'll probably enjoy the Santos Sisters. It is worth noting that if you pick up the second issue, there is a classified ads page, and you might see a little ad for this very podcast on that page. So yeah, check that out. It's only available physically. You cannot find it digitally. So check out floatingworldcomics.com to order it, or check out your local comic store. Obviously, they might have a copy. So I enjoyed it. Dumb fun. If you like Archie and or 90s Rob Liefeld comics, you're going to enjoy Santos Sisters. So you might like it if you don't like either of those things, though. It might be completely new to you. I also wanted to talk very briefly about the Ant-Man series. I read Ant-Man number 3 and number 4. This is the 4-issue miniseries that Al Ewing wrote with art by Tom Riley and colors by Jordie Bellaire. They did this to celebrate the 60th anniversary of the Tiniest Avenger, aka Ant-Man. I know nothing about Ant-Man aside from the sort of random issues of Avengers from the 70s I've read. I only know the Paul Rudd version of the character. So this miniseries was a lot of fun. Basically, the gimmick is that there's a mysterious Ant-Man from the year 2549 who has to unite all the former Ant-Men together. That's Hank Pym, Eric O'Grady, and the aforementioned Scott Lang. He has to kind of get them all together to help them fight off this big threat that's there in the future. We find out that the big threat is actually Ultron, who's gained the powers of the Allfather. So basically is Asgardian god robot that they have to fight. It's awesome. One thing I really like about this is that because it's kind of like told from the perspective of the future Ant-Man, that there's like the comic itself at times is designed like a comic that came out or will come out in the year 2549. So there's like dialogue boxes that will say like the Marvel narrative experience has been adjusted for your time period. Please obey all reader instructions. It's so much fun. It's so ridiculous.
That's great.
And like the 4th issue has like a big double page like exposition dump, but all the exposition they're explaining is stuff that will happen in an alternate future. So it's like Ultron arrives from the past, loaded with Asgardian magic, and uses it to take the power of the Allfather. That happens in Mighty Thor number 4774. So look out for that issue on the stands coming up soon.
That's
right. They would have gone to a number one again, like a million times.
That's the legacy numbering, Brian.
Yeah, legacy number. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I love what Al Ewing has been doing with this book and his Defender stuff, just being able to combine a love of Silver Age Marvel with contemporary Marvel storylines. All the stuff that happens in this book, it has been referenced. The back page of every issue will say, hey, if you want to know more about this thing that was referenced, check out these Ant-Man issues, or check happens in this. So it's all well researched. As someone that knows very little about Ant-Man and has a very cursory knowledge of the Avengers in general, in terms of their comic history, I didn't find it confusing. I found myself really wanting to read a bunch of old Ant-Man comics, which I guess they did their job well if they're doing that, make me want to do that. So, and very briefly, I do have to say Tom Riley's artwork is fantastic. I read his stuff in that Thing miniseries that just wrapped up recently, and this book, it's Silver Age influence without looking retro. So if you like stuff that Evan Shaner does, or Paulo Rivera, Javier Pulido a little bit, he fits that style and is perfect for this type of story. So I enjoy this. And again, even if you know nothing about Ant-Man, as well, we're tracking these issues down. They're a lot of fun if you want some dumb superhero stuff.
That sounds cool.
Yeah.
I think I'll probably grab that Thing book and this Ant-Man book once they're fully wrapped up and I know the Thing's out, but I'll probably just binge all this. And at some point, I will try to read everything that Al Ewing has written for Marvel, because I feel like every time I pick something up of his, it's good. It's just really, really good.
Oh yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, I've never been disappointed in a Ewing book so far.
Exactly. Anyways, let me talk about some last two books that I read. I'll say from last week's episode, my pick was Earth Divers #1. It was pretty good. I think the story is a bit heavy-handed in terms of some of the things they want the team wanted to get you up to speed on, but otherwise it's a pretty interesting story. Let's go back in time and kill Christopher Columbus. Pretty fun. But the books that I want to talk about really quick, this is one of the books was Monotone Blue by Nagabe. You may know that name from the series The Girl from the Other Side that I think I've been screaming about for the past couple of years. It's a wonderful little manga story that takes place in a slightly medieval time where there are outsiders who are these demons, and you don't really know what they are, and this little girl seems to be immune from whatever these demons can do to people. But it's very slice of lifey. It's very down to earth. There's nothing high action or super shonen-y about it. It's about just this little girl and her protector, who is this one of the demons who has kind of gained more humanity than others, and he's trying to take care of this little girl and protect her. It's very sweet. The ending is extremely tragic. It's wonderful. But Monotone Blue is a little story about a cat boy who has a crush on a lizard boy because the lizard boy has a bright blue tail and the cat boy likes to look at it. And I promise you, this is not about penises, okay? Despite whatever you may think, everything about this book looks like they're talking about penises the whole time. They're definitely not. It's a lizard tail, okay? Or it might be. I don't really know.
Can I introduce you to the idea of metaphor?
Listen, Brian, it might be a metaphor for penises. I'm not really sure. But again, I'm also just a cis guy reading a romance story, so I'm just going to insert whatever thoughts are in my head, which is apparently penises all the time. Anyways, this is a good read. This is a really good read. It's really sweet. I think it falls into a lot of the tropes of high school based romance stories of he's the dumb one and he's the really smart one, and suddenly they have to work together, But I also think that Nagabe has a good time taking the animalistic side of things. The lazy guy is also a cat who likes to sleep all day, and the lizard guy is the astute student who is always being on the lookout for predators and stuff like that, because everyone at the school is a mammal except for him. So there's a lot of interesting bits going on in the story, and I think you could probably attach a lot of metaphor on top of various elements that happen, and ultimately it's really fun and really sweet. I think the book overall is very wholesome. You get these wonderful moments where the cat boy. I didn't write down anyone's name because I'm a terrible critic, but the cat boy is cold, is very warm because it's a hot summer day. But the lizard, who doesn't regulate his temperature the same way, is nice and cool. And so they have this moment where the cat's like, "Oh my God, you're so cold," and he's like rubbing up on him. And, it's very like, oh, why are they doing that? This is kind of weird. So if you're looking for like a mostly cute romance story, there is a little bit of implied assault, I will say, at the end. It's a little trigger warning on that, but otherwise this is a very sweet book from start to finish. Plus Nagabe's art is just like chef kiss good. So it's just a one and done type of story. I highly recommend it if you're just looking for something sweet to read. The other book I want to talk about really quick, though, is Old Dog #1. This is Declan Shalvey and Clayton Coles. The synopsis, for those of you who maybe didn't hear about this, is Jack Lynch was once a promising CIA operative. We're going like 180 degrees the other direction, by the way, from my last book. On the eve of retirement, Jack is looking back at a failed career. He's tasked with one final mission that goes horribly wrong. He wakes up years later to a changed world and deeper changes within him. When a shadow group offers Lynch a second chance at a life of adventure, he's paired with the last person he could ever imagine. In order to adjust, this old dog will have to learn some new tricks. I don't really care about the synopsis because I feel like that's a bad way to pitch this book. Mm-hmm. Something about the way that Shelvey writes is really interesting, and I feel like he has a good grasp on telling stories about people who have a lot of brokenness in them. And that's what really clicked for me with this book. There's clearly a guy with a lot of problems doing some, CIA operative, black ops work. And there's an action story that's also happening. And I think when the two stories meet at the end of the issue, it really works. And this might just be me having read a lot of Time Before Time, which I feel like has a similar vibe of like lots of things happening separately that get merged together really quickly. Not that that's a new concept by any means, but I feel like Shelvey really understands how to make that work. The twist and the mystery box at the center of this story is also a huge hook. I can't believe that the synopsis doesn't tell you that there's like a big question mark in the story, but it's huge, and it feels like a J.J. Abrams Lost type thing, where like the whole story is probably never going to touch on that thing, and instead we're going to work around it nonstop. If you hate that, don't read this book. But I think the most
damning thing you could have said. This book
I know. But I also want to say that I think that works because this book is very, what I feel like so far is very quote lo-fi sci-fi, in that there is a sci-fi element to the story, but it is not the whole story isn't focused on the sci-fi element of it, and instead it's about this old man who has to partner with this mysterious person that he never thought he would work with, but in a way where like the technology is there, but it's not like, again, the focus of the story, and instead we get to see these two people have to deal with their differences. So I don't know. I think this book is really cool, and I think that mystery, unknown technology thing is probably going to come around and show its head at some point. But I like the way that this first issue was pitched, and I think if you're into Time Before Time, you're going to love this book. If you like Shelvey's other work, you're going to love this book. I think this dude has grown significantly since his last few works that he did. Savage Town and Bog Bodies, I think, were okay books, and I think actually Savage Town was pretty good. But either way, like, I feel like he's grown as a writer from working on Time Before Time, and I think Old Dog is going to be like a banger of a series once it wraps up, or I don't know how long it's going to go, but my guess it's probably going to be a miniseries. So yeah, pretty solid stuff.
Nice.
Anyways, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about what's on the top of our pile, and I have some questions about the She-Hulk TV show that I think we just need to get into. So get prepared for some full spoilers for all of She-Hulk as of October 9th, 2022. So we'll be right back. Wrap up our show this week, we're going to be talking about what's on the top of our pile, whether it's a new comic, an old comic, or something that's been sitting in your backlog for way too long that you just want to read. We're going to be asking what's on the top of your pile. So let's kick things off with Paul. What is on the top of your pile?
Literally on the top of my pile, because I just went to the comic book store the other day. It's a book that came out last week, I think, and that's Superman Space Age #2. That is the second issue in the Prestige format, a little bit oversized issue miniseries that Mark Russell is writing, with art by Mike Allred, colors by Laura Allred, and letters by Dave Sharp. This is kind of an Elseworld story, kind of alternate version of Superman, but it's set in middle of the 20th century. Basically, the idea is the current time in the comic is 1985, like right before the Crisis on Infinite Earths is about to start. But they're flashing back to the origins of Superman and the rest of the Justice League in like the 60s and 70s here. The first issue, we saw Clark Kent basically deciding to become Superman and start saving people after being sort of inspired or maybe inspired is not the right word, but after seeing the assassination of John F. Kennedy, he's like, well, I have to do something to help people out. Can't just stay here on the farm. So that inspires him to become Superman. And this, right?
Sorry.
No,
All right.
And then we also see some interesting sort of alternate versions of the rest of the Justice League. For example, in that first issue, we find out that Bruce Wayne is actually just a rich guy that is developing technology for the military. He builds this sort of like sleek espionage suit that kind of looks like a bat suit, and he's going to sell it to the military to fight the Cold War. And of course, they don't buy it. So he ends up having to put it on himself. And that inspires him to become Batman. So it's like a different take on the Justice League and on these characters, sort of inspired by the Cold War era.
Sure.
This second issue seems to focus on the first time that Batman, Superman, and the rest of the Justice League, Wonder Woman, Flash, Green Lantern, all team up for the first time. It's set in the early 70s. What I like about it is, first off, you get Mike Allred artwork, which is always nice. And he's doing sort of, 60s and 70s era storytelling, which I think his artwork is perfectly suited for. He obviously loves drawing fashion from that time period. Yeah. And Mark Russell is a creator who, he's known for doing more very satirical, tongue-in-cheek type work. If you've read his Flintstones book or any of his other, like he did that one about Jesus coming back as a superhero, The Second Coming, which I haven't read, but I know he does like stuff like that. Like it's high concept satire. This book feels a lot more earnest. It's basically these two creators exploring what they find so inspiring about Superman as a character and kind of like their take on the Man of Tomorrow as an influence on pop culture and superheroes in general. So I like that kind of stuff. I like to see characters play with Superman as an idea and what he represents. So I'm enjoying this book. And again, like I said, anytime you get Mike and Laura Allred on art together, it's always a treat. So
yeah. I've been rereading through the X-Statix series, and I mean, I love the way that the Allreds do like the X-Men, because I mean, they're not drawing like major X-Men characters for the most part. Right. But for instance, they draw Professor Xavier with the big like Vulcan upward turned eyebrows and stuff, and he kind of looks like a shithead. I love it. I love that absolute look, because it's such a different take on the look of the X-Men. And of course, I know I've said this on previous episodes, but the letter columns in the back of those issues never get old, because the people reading X-Statix back in the early 2000s hated that series with a passion that I don't understand. If you hate a book so much, just stop reading it. Yeah. Clearly these people would not. And they were so mad about every choice that the creative team made, especially Mike and Laura Allred's art. They're like, this is not what my comic books are like. And I hope all those people stop reading comic books, because I don't want them in this community. It's unbelievable.
Are you really going to tell people that if they don't like a book, they should stop reading it?
Yeah.
That's not your thing.
Yeah.
Well, here's Mike, you would never do that.
All right, I'm a hypocrite, okay? Yeah, but I mean, I guess I don't have rage. I'm not rage reading a comic book. You know what I mean?
More like disgust.
Yeah, it's more just like a disappointment and frustration in myself that I spent and wasted the time, But anyways, I saw this book on the shelf. I think I saw the first issue, and it looked really exciting. So maybe this will be I'll collect, once this all gets collected up, I'll probably take a read, because I love looking at Mike and Laura Allred's art.
Of course. Yeah, anytime. That's great stuff.
Definitely. Brian, what about you? What's on the top of your pile?
So this is a manga that I happened to just see on an end cap at the comic shop the other day. And that is Dinosaur Sanctuary Volume 1.
Okay.
This is by Itaru Kinoshita. It's basically like, what if Jurassic Park, but it hadn't immediately gone wrong? To the point where, like, at this point in this world, dinosaur zoos are just kind of like a thing now.
Cool.
And our main character, I think, is a zookeeper at a dinosaur zoo.
What else do we need to say, right? Like,
yeah. As the quote goes, you had me at Dinosaur Zoo.
Oh man, scrolling through the preview that Google has, this looks amazing. Like
Yeah.
full anime manga vibes, but then the dinosaurs are hyper realistic.
Yeah, and like using our modern ideas about like what dinosaurs actually looked like.
Mm-hmm.
They had a consultant. I can't remember what their name was now, but basically like a fact checker, or like a research assistant, to make sure they were actually getting all this dinosaur stuff right.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so you've got like the T-Rex has feathers and stuff.
Gotcha. Oh yeah, I'm seeing that one of the dinosaurs have little feathers all over it. That's really cool. Well,
Yeah.
fun.
And like I was definitely like a dinosaur kid growing up, so this is exactly what I would have been doing in that world.
Yes, totally understandable. Well, that looks like a lot of fun. You have to report back on that and whether it pays off, but it looks super fun, to say the least.
What about you?
Well, for me, I guess before I get in the top of my picks, top of my pile, I guess I should say we have some folks hanging out with us on Discord, and here's what they're reading. Danny is going to be reading Batman Incorporated #1, which I was very excited to see was coming out, and then I decided I don't need to pick up another book that I'm probably going to dislike. So I hope it's good, Danny. And Hannah is reading Mark Waid's Flash, or continuing to read Mark Waid's Flash, and their conclusion is that Bart is a whiny little bitch. Their words, not mine. But that's what was said on the Discord. So if you have some thoughts, or you want to get a shout out on the show, make sure you're on the IRCB Discord, and make sure you're here when we're recording these episodes live on Sundays, somewhere between 1 and 3 p.m. Eastern Standard. But my pick for this week is a book that I'm very excited about because I didn't even know it was a thing. But this is Star Wars Visions #1. And now the Star Wars Vision show, I know a lot of people liked, a lot of people didn't like, but it's an anthology show, and that's kind of the goal. You're trying a whole new bunch of things. This issue in particular covers the samurai episode of Star Wars Visions. This is by Takashi Okazaki. The synopsis, and I'm just going to read this. From the creative mind behind Star Wars Visions episode The Duel comes an all-new story. Takashi Okazaki from Afro Samurai is continuing his storytelling from the acclaimed Star Wars Vision episode The Duel, featuring the Ronin. The mythology of Star Wars infused with the elements of feudal Japan makes this issue a must-read for Star Wars and manga fans alike, and I'm so excited. The cover alone is breaking my brain. I love that episode so much. That beautiful moment, if you haven't seen it, I'm sorry, you should go fix that. But the moment where this guy pulls this red lightsaber out of a scabbard is probably the most excited I've been for a Star Wars property in a very, very long time. So I really, really like this, and I'm excited. This looks like it's just going to be a one-shot, so I'm excited to just pick it up and read it and be done with it. I'm so hyped.
Yeah, that was arguably the one good thing in Star Wars Visions.
Before we get too deep into that comment, yes, I'm very excited. I'm glad that you enjoyed it as well, and we'll have to talk about it on a future episode. But speaking of Disney television, I did want to talk a little bit about She-Hulk. I know the season's almost wrapped up. I think the final episode is next week. So, of course, we're just going to talk about it this week because why not? Right. But Brian, Paul, you're up to date. You've seen everything that's happened. I'm going to put a big alert here. Xander, maybe play some sort of like clang or kerrang noise, whatever.
A klaxon.
Klaxon, that's what it's called. We're going to be talking full spoilers for all of She-Hulk. Up until this point as of October 9th, 2022. So you've been warned. I've given you at least 30 seconds of warning. So let's talk about She-Hulk for just a little bit. I am curious as to what everyone's thoughts. And so Brian, maybe let's start with you and then we'll kind of bounce around from there.
I think it's really funny. I think that all the actors are having a good time with it. I think that Tatiana Maslany is doing a great job as Jen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I got nothing but good things to say about it.
Yeah, what about you, Paul?
I am so happy that I was proven wrong. I remember seeing the initial trailer for this and thinking it looked terrible. For those of you that maybe don't know, She-Hulk, Jennifer Walters, is one of my favorite Marvel characters. Something about that character I've always really liked. She's right up there with Ben Grimm and Steve Rogers for me. So I was very skeptical about the show because I have not really liked the other Marvel TV shows so far. And then, of course, I think a lot of people pointed out that the CGI was spotty at best in that initial trailer. So I was very skeptical, but like I said, I'm happy to be proven wrong. I really liked every episode. I think the last couple episodes have been some of the strongest. They've done a really good job of making a show that is a part of the MCU, but never feels beholden to it. They've really cut back on the tie-ins to the movies. It so far has not built up to a big knockdown, drag out superhero fight, although we see a little bit of that in the most recent episode. But I think overall it kind of stands on its own as a very fun, enjoyable, low stakes show set in that world, which is kind of what I always wanted from the Marvel MCU TV shows. So it delivers on all fronts for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just to give my 2 cents before we dive into it any further. I mean, I'm one of those people that just absolutely hates it. No, I'm kidding. I love this show. I was in the same boat as you, Paul. I was really skeptical. I was like, God, the CG. Could Marvel just actually give this show some budget or whatever? And I still think the CG is a little spotty. It's not perfect. I think that they try to do a really good job of keeping Tatiana's likeness like in the face and like the overall feel, but it just I'm sorry, it just doesn't work. Like she has a specific face shape and she has teeth that don't work with the CG face. Like, I'm just gonna say that. That being said, all like that aside, I'm willing to forgive it because the writing is stupendous, right? Like, I'll give up a bad looking movie or like a bad looking anything if the story is there. And they've delivered that consistently. Like, it's poking fun at itself. It's poking fun at the MCU without being too self-referential, like a he's right behind me, isn't he kind of moment, you know? I feel like it's worked from beginning to end in every issue. I'm like, I don't know how they're going to deliver it. I have to remind myself that it's all a big joke. And it actually is really, really fun. Like, everything about the show is not trying to be serious. It's not trying to tie back into the MCU. It's just exists within the universe, which again, I think that's what we all wanted from a lot of these MCU TV shows.
Yeah, I think that Tom in the chat nailed it, saying that Tatiana Maslany has a very expressive face and that the CGI just doesn't grab that well, like it doesn't mesh. And I think that's exactly the issue I have with it. Yeah.
But
I also think it helps that, like, as you mentioned, like, her specifically, but all the actors are generally funny people. And I think a lot of the MCU like movies have tried to like interject humor, but it always comes off kind of like snarky. And this show, like, it flirts with that, but it never feels like mean-spirited or snarky in the way that some of the other Marvel attempts at humor in the movies does to me specifically.
Sure.
You know what I mean? It's very like genuine. And I think a lot of that does come down to the performances from the actors. We do see Patty Harrison show up in that one at the wedding episode, and I love her. She's so funny. I'm so glad to see her pop up. And it was like that thing, like her comedy is so over the top, but it fit with the world that they built in that show. So
yeah, it helps that this show got itself off the ground with the comedy bent, right? It's not like Guardians of the Galaxy where we're pulling on heartstrings and then immediately trying to make a left turn to make a joke and then back to the heart. Like,
yeah,
it all feels like natural. Like, all of the jokes, all of the beats, all the bits like actually feel natural. And of course you can do that with a television show a lot easier than you can with a movie. I'm not trying to argue that here, but it definitely all flows. And even to the point where like you've got someone like Tim, I want to say Tim Robinson, but that's not his name.
Tim Roth,
thank you. In the show where, like, I don't know, I feel like historically he's played like much more dramatic roles, but he works so well as like a bit character throughout this whole, like, especially in the last 2 episodes, right? Like totally insane with him and his stupid compound that he's got to like group therapize a bunch of villains or superheroes and villains.
Yeah, it's like a group therapy retreat for D-list supervillains.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like this is refreshing to me, right? Yeah. I think it's so crazy. And I want to talk about Andor a little bit today too, but I know we're not all caught up, so I don't want to dive into the details, but I feel like something clicked finally over at Disney and they've realized, oh, we can just put out TV shows. They don't have to have like these big implications. And I feel like with Andor and with She-Hulk, they're finally like hitting the mark, or maybe these are just flukes. I can't really tell yet.
I'm going to, based on track record, these feel like this might just be lucky flukes for Disney. But I think what's really nice, again, it's like, obviously I think the most recent episode, which I guess we've already done the spoiler alert. So like having on-screen team up between She-Hulk and Daredevil feels like, we're building Daredevil up to, which I absolutely loved. I love that Charlie Cox is like, well, if I show up, there's got to be a fight in a hallway. That's the only reason I'm doing. Only way I can do
that
do a
moment,
show,
the camera cut to a hallway, and I Kelly and I were sitting on the couch next to each other. I think I like accidentally bruised Kelly's arm. I was squeezing it, just like they're gonna do the hallway scene again. Like I was screaming in the house.
But I like it because it felt like, and I think the show in general, the seasons in general, really captured the feel of reading like a mid-tier Marvel comic, where it's like, because the Marvel universe is so like shared universe, anyone can show up in a book, but it doesn't have to be a big deal. It can just happen. It's like, oh look, Daredevil popped up in this issue of She-Hulk, and it's not like a big crossover. It's not like the other shows where it felt like everything was building toward the same conclusion with the movies. This feels like its own little pocket, and that's, I think, makes it so refreshing, you know?
Yeah, Daredevil really popped up in this one, didn't he?
All right.
Ding dong.
Yeah, I mean, him showing up, I saw an interview pretty recently with him, and he was like, apparently him and Vincent D'Onofrio keep in touch, right? Like, and they were saying, like, Vincent's like, they're gonna call us, and Charlie Cox is like, there's no way, man, the show ended in 2017. And the fact that like they're actually they brought both of those characters back, Vincent D'Onofrio as Kingpin and Hawkeye, and then Charlie Cox here, like, I'm glad that Marvel isn't trying to completely reinvent the wheel. This is not me saying that all the X-Men characters can come back. This is not me saying that. I'm going to just put that out there or actors, I should say. But regardless, like I think that they made the right choice, because that Daredevil show was a perfect like exploration into that character. And so trying to find ways to mix it into the happy-go-lucky MCU while keeping some of that, the character there is very exciting to me, because I felt like Charlie Cox was still that like down in the dumps Matt Murdock, and he finally found, like, once he got out of New York, he could actually be happy for a moment. Now, of course, he's going to go back to New York and brood and just be terrible, but like he at least got a moment of happiness here, right?
Yeah, Daredevil firsthand knows how hard that Catholic guilt can hit, so just only a matter of time. I do think it was funny. The one thing that they can't get away from is, properly lighting anything in these TV shows, just like the film. So like she makes a joke about Daredevil's costume being ketchup and mustard, and it's just maroon and gold. Like, it's not bright at all. So
color
it's like in the dark
on
on top of a parking garage.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Which she then destroys, which I don't think a lawyer would do.
Yeah. That was the bit that I did like, is Matt Murdock calls ISIS. That's property damage, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was worried that her super suit was going to be the onesie. I'm glad that she got shorts or leotard or whatever. I was worried that it was just going to be that, and I was like,
yeah,
come on, we can't make the CGI horny guys horny. We can't do it. We just can't do it. But I'm glad that they put her in shorts. So it was a good look. I'm glad that they kept with the classic, like, purple and white, and black. It all looked really cool when she actually donned the uniform. And yeah, but of course, I mean, it's her. I don't know, the CG just, it's not there. But I also, again, am willing to accept it because we got like an overall like good story out of it.
Yeah. I mean, if Marvel wasn't bending over backwards to avoid paying union workers, then maybe we would have gotten a better product out of it. But
yeah, so I guess I don't know, how are you guys feeling overall? Are you excited for the end of this first season? Because I think the next episode is the finale. We got the big gala episode that happened where I did appreciate the like meta commentary at the end of the most recent episode, where she's like, hold on, this is the end? Is the finale next week? Like, I know the show is very self-aware of itself. Like, Jen Walters talking to the screen is a gimmick, and I know it, and I know that it's supposed to be Deadpool's only, but I think she makes it work better in a lot of ways.
Well, yeah. Again, to be fair, it was her gimmick first. John Byrne did it in the Sensational She-Hulk series before Deadpool was even created. So that's Jennifer Walters' territory.
Paul's got the receipts. Thank you.
But but I do think the show doesn't go overboard with that stuff. Thankfully, it's done in a way that is smart, and it's not like The Office where she's constantly turning to the camera. Like, it just happens enough to like, we got to wrap up this episode. Like, I did appreciate that. I'm very excited to see what happens.
It's like,
so go ahead.
Maybe once an episode.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not even like a Scrubs like narration either, right? Like I do appreciate that it's not leaned on so much that it like becomes the crux of the show. So,
Right.
or a crutch of the show, I should say.
Yeah. It's overall it's well done, and yeah, I like the way they used it at the end of the most recent episode to signal a big dramatic change in tone. It looks like the conclusion of the most recent episode, Jennifer Walters, everything kind of comes to a head, and she hulks out finally, like fully for the first time really in the show. And I feel like that moment was like, oh yeah, she on top, not just all the being green and tall and strong, there is a Hulk underneath all that, and that can like have some negative consequences, right? It's hard to control. So I'm really looking forward to the way that it kind of shifts the show maybe tonally to kind of reconfigure that. Say, yeah, she is still a Hulk at heart, on top of everything else. So feels like an opportunity to kind of shift the tone a little bit.
That's interesting because I took that as it's not that she's a Hulk. It's that Jen has so much shit going on, right? The whole story has been building up like her with stress and anxiety and all this other stuff. And even though she's been able to get some of that out, whether that's in a yurt or hanging out with Daredevil, at the same time, like none of these problems, these actual bigger problems that she has go away, right? They're temporarily relieved. So like in this final moment, as someone is, got the best of her in a way that she didn't realize, I saw that as like, that's Jen taking out her frustrations, right? Like Tatiana, like the actress is very small. And like when she grows into this She-Hulk, like I feel like that's her, like that's a way for her to, she's violently expressing herself. And it's a combination of like the Hulk strength and rage, but also her own rage, because we've seen time and time again that she does have a very, very good control over this Hulk in comparison to Bruce Banner. And I think that's kind of like the shtick with She-Hulk, is that she has a much better grasp on it. But I don't know. I saw that as like, was it her just hulking out, or was it her just genuinely being frustrated with all of these pressures that have been put on her the whole season? Like she almost lost her costume designer, and that's still like in a tense situation. This job is basically a gimmick so that this company can have the She-Hulk working for them. Like all of these things kind of falling down, and she's just finally venting. Obviously not very constructive, but still like that's her like lashing out.
Yeah, it's like her very human, understandable rage, but we're seeing it through the lens of a Hulk's strength.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah,
that makes sense. I mean, they hinted that in the very first episode, where like Bruce is basically explaining, you have to control your rage, control your anger, anything could set you off. And she's like, well, that's just what it's like being a woman. So like that's already been a part of the show. And that's a good point, Mike. I mean, the idea that it might be interesting to explore that idea where it's like the Hulk's strength and rage can be seen as useful, but She-Hulk's could be seen as, just the way like strength and confidence can be seen negatively when expressed by a woman, in politics or culture. Same thing where it's like, She-Hulk hulking out is even scarier because like she can't control it, where we can accept Bruce Banner's hulking out because he's punched a space god or something. Like it's been useful.
Because boys will be boys.
Yeah, exactly. Green boys will be green boys. So
yeah. Well, yeah, I guess the last thing I want to talk about the show is Megan Thee Stallion. Do we want to complain like the rest of the internet about it, or
I don't care.
I don't care. I don't. Me either. I thought it was funny because it was part of the episode. Like it's not like it came out of nowhere. It was part of the episode. I think it's very funny.
It's exactly what those post credits things should be pointless, like jokes. They shouldn't be anything more important than that. I do.
Exactly.
If I could have one complaint about the show, and it's super minor, and I hate to do this because I understand adaptations, you necessarily have to change characters and change things, but Titania in the comics is a blue collar character. She's married to the Absorbing Man. She loves him. She's a tough blue collar presentation of a character, of a supervillain. That's radically different from what we get in the TV show. And I like that actress that's playing that character. I like the storyline they did, but I'm like, just get a different name. Like my Titania is, would not be the head of a beauty, supply. She wouldn't be a magnate for skincare products.
Sure. Well, Paul hates women. So
Whoa.
let's
Edit that out, Zander.
just kidding. No, I totally feel that, because in my mind, when that character was introduced, I was like, what, is the Absorbing Man gonna go? Are we gonna somehow get that Black Bolt like storyline? Like that could be very exciting.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, I totally agree there. But
we did get the Wrecking Crew for a hot sec there.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. And I definitely thought that the Frogger guy in the most recent episodes was like a mock of the Kick-Ass character. It's not, but it looks like it from the still that Danny shared in Discord. All right. Well, I guess any final thoughts on She-Hulk? Anything else you guys want to talk about? What are you most excited for, I guess, to wrap up this season?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know what to expect.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what's going to happen. I assume that they're probably going to have her like take down the internet trolls that have been trying to ruin her life, but probably not in the Hulk way, probably in the lawyer way.
I know everyone expects Reed Richards and crew to pop up in one of the movies. I'm just saying, Jennifer Walters was a member of the Fantastic Four. She's good friends with Ben Grimm. We're finally going to get the ever-loving blue-eyed thing pop up in the next episode. Cannot wait.
Paul is using a Reed Richards level of stretch to try to make this happen. I love it. That's great. I think I'm really excited to see Tim Roth become the Abomination again. I think it has to happen just to wrap up this season. But we'll see. And we'll see if Mark Ruffalo makes an appearance as well. I think I'm thinking of like all the cameos coming back for one final episode. Who knows if that's actually going to be the case, but that's where I'm at with it. But it looks, I mean, either way, I'm excited for the end of this, and I think it's overall been like a really, really enjoyable season. So thanks for chatting with me again about it, guys. Who knows, maybe we'll do more television talk in the future when we can finally sync up everyone's schedules to actually be caught up on a TV show at some time. But I guess to wrap things up, next week it's going to be me and Danny and Nick. We're going to be talking about comics, probably going to be talking about Vanish #1, and Danny's going to maybe bully me into buying issue #2 so we can finally talk about it. As always, you can check us out on Instagram and Twitter and TikTok, and we've got a Discord and Goodreads. All that stuff is in the show notes, so make sure you click on those links, give us a follow, give us a rating and review, all that stuff. It always helps the show. Infinity Shred is the best band in the universe. They do all of our music. Can't thank them enough. Zander is here. I want to say thank you to Brian and Paul for joining me on this episode. Thank you to Nick for proof listening. Thank you to everyone hanging out with us in the Discord. You're all wonderful human beings. And thank you for listening this long in the episode. It means a lot to know that you care about me saying the same thing every week on I Read Comic Books. So until next time, remember, comics are good, and so are you.